Good choice. That's honestly a really good choice.
Yeah.
All right, ready to go, guys?
Yep.
Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, Did You Eat Yet? My name's Harrison.
My name's Alex.
And we're here today with a very special guest. And it's funny because this guy is actually the first guy we ever had on our podcast.
That's right.
You guys never saw this episode because that episode turned out to be garbage. Like, we had none of the right stuff. We had none of the right equipment. Everything was absolute garbage.
We were still in our infancy stages.
But that's how you know that this guy was supporting. You know what I mean? This guy was like supportive of our dreams. And here we are now, finally with the right stuff. We have all the right equipment now.
Now that we're big with 40 subscribers on YouTube,
Just popping.
we're popping. Yeah.
Jason,
Exploding.
everyone. Let's give it up to Jason.
Hello.
What's going on, man? Hey, so
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me back.
honestly, dude, new house too. We were filming
Yes.
over at Alex's house, weren't
Yes.
Yeah.
we? And man, it's just look at us now. Look
How
at us
long
now.
ago was that, actually?
That was earlier this year. I think that was March. One of the first
No.
episodes we ever.
Yeah, that was around
Right
Mar-
before the pandemic?
Right
Yeah,
before
yeah.
the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's because.
Oh, yeah, because it was after Cambodia. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One of the first episodes we ever posted was actually like late March. It was like right before the pandemic, and then prime time, first week of pandemic, quarantine. We had the second episode out, and then we just dropped.
Man, we were trying so hard to get more guests, but eventually we were like, maybe it shouldn't be a good idea to have guests coming to my apartment.
Yeah. And I feel like no one knew how bad this pandemic was going to be, right?
Right.
So
I'm glad you guys brought it back, though.
Yeah.
Here we are, man. So,
And we upgraded, so.
Yes.
absolutely. So tell us, man, what you been up to during this quarantine, man? I know you've been all over the place. I know you went back home for a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It has been quite a year. Yeah, I mean, I was still in New York City through like the peak of the pandemic because I didn't want to go home,
Right.
And give it to my parents or whatever. But then my mom is a nurse at a nursing home in
Yeah.
Connecticut, where I'm from. So then around the very end of April, when it was still kind of pretty bad, I just felt like I should go home, and there's nothing I could really do, but at least I could just be there with my parents because like nursing homes that's when the articles of like nursing homes were getting really bad. So then I was home in Connecticut for a couple of months, came back to Brooklyn, and then I've kind of been back and forth here and there.
Right.
But
What was like the breaking point? What was that the straw that broke the camel's back?
for coming back, Wait, what do you mean?
Let's start with going to Connecticut, and then we'll talk about coming back.
going to Connecticut was very much just like because my parents were so concerned for me,
Yeah.
and because my mom was, the whatever, the thing that broke the camel's, the straw that broke the camel's back was seeing a photo of my mom in like the full like hazmat suit,
Oh,
mask,
that's right.
visor, everything. And she's like 60 years old, so she's not
course.
young. And so when I saw that and like knowing that she has to wear that every day to work, that's when I was like, oh, okay, kind of just want to be home and
Be supportive.
yeah, exactly.
Was she getting tested while she was working like that?
At the time, she wasn't. They only started that like
They didn't even have tests back then, right?
no, they did.
They did, but it was
Oh, really?
like very, very. You had to be
really
very
hard
exclusive to get it.
Yeah, you
or,
have to
I
have
see.
shown symptoms.
or be like a zoo animal. Apparently,
Oh, interesting.
No, it's only like
you know what I'm talking
I
about, right?
remember that. I remember that. Gorillas out here getting tested before us.
I know, right?
That's the kind of world we live in, y'all.
But yeah, no. Eventually, they started testing her like, actually once a week, starting in like August. Yeah.
Okay, so that was probably
Yeah,
that
things
made-
have calmed down a lot,
Yeah.
so she's good, and yeah.
Man, that's great. And then what what was that like? I'm sure living with your parents can't be easy. You know,
Yeah, it was definitely an adjustment.
There's got to be a
going
little bit of
back.
I'm about to leave this place. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, the thing is surprisingly, like, even though Connecticut is like so much more spread out and there's a lot more space, the thing that I was excited about going home was like having a backyard and like being able to go outside and not worry about being around people.
Right.
I think I went on a walk like once or twice.
Whoa.
The 2 months I was home. I just pretty much stayed home. And I think over time I felt a little bit sort of trapped. Like if I had to leave the place, I'm using my parents' car, so I have to ask them, make sure they're cool with me going somewhere, and just like, and my parents are definitely more on the like don't go out too much,
Super
or,
cautious
like,
side,
yeah,
right.
very cautious. So I just didn't really leave the house. So that's why I was itching to come back to the city where at least like I can be in control of like going out and like protecting myself. and
Sound like you're like in high school again or something.
for sure. It definitely feels like
Be
that
home
a
by
little
9.
bit.
But 9 is every hour of the day.
No, but I just didn't even go. I didn't really. I mean, I don't have that many people to see either, I guess. But yeah, I just felt.
Do you have siblings?
I have a brother and a sister. So the like most of the 2 months I was back there from like April to June or whatever, it was just me.
Okay,
So it's definitely
yeah.
like a lot of focus attention on me. From the
Yeah, I was gonna
parents,
say
too.
because when I went back to, or not back to, but when I went to Pennsylvania to stay with Esther and her parents, like I would go out with Esther or I would go with her brother and go on those walks. But I generally didn't really go on walks by myself, so
Right.
I
That's
can
true.
see the struggle there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And my sister came back at the very end.
makes it a little bit better, a little bit
Made
more of
it-
a buffer.
Definitely made it better. Yeah.
yeah.
Man, that's so interesting.
So when you came back, what was the first thing that you did?
What was the first thing I did? I don't
Back in
remember.
Brooklyn, I mean.
Like, what's the biggest difference
The
between living
biggest
on
difference is like
Connecticut's super suburban, but like Brooklyn
in the
is obviously
suburbs,
Brooklyn.
I have to drive my parents' car if I want to go somewhere. Here, I have a bike, so even though the pandemic is like still around,
Yeah.
I feel comfortable being able to get around.
That's so
places.
weird. I feel like most people would say the opposite, where having a car provides you more like mobility, more
Right.
freedom. But you're saying you actually don't like that.
Well,
as much.
it sounded like he had limited access to his car.
Right.
That's the problem.
Yeah, just because
okay.
like
Share
if
it
I'm
all.
going somewhere, like my dad's gonna want to know where I'm going, and
Oh,
like
right.
it's just like easier to not go usually.
That's true.
And not that there's that many places to go
Yeah, right.
either.
That's true. I'm always curious about this, like, because it's not true for me. I'm wondering, like, obviously you grew up in Connecticut, you went to high school in Connecticut. Do you have like a lot of friends back where you're like from? Like, obviously, Alex, you're from California. You have like a lot of friends. I don't have a lot of Maryland friends anymore, and I only say that because all my friends they left.
Are you saying you don't have many friends that still live in Connecticut?
Yeah,
or
yeah,
like live
yeah.
in Maryland?
Right.
Do you have like a solid crew you could go back to in
I
Connecticut?
don't have the closest thing to a crew that I would have is my brother and sister and like one friend from
It's
my
a family
home
crew right
church.
there.
Yeah, isn't that so weird
Yeah.
though? Because like we could leave New York, come back to New York, and like we have a crew in New York. You know
Right,
what I mean?
right.
But like it's not like that about where,
Yeah,
we
exactly.
grew up with. You know what I mean?
So it's not like there was that many people to hit up when I was home either. It's just
So
like,
interesting.
yeah.
Pennsylvania was the same for Esther and her brother. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people from Pennsylvania aren't actually living in Pennsylvania. So yeah, either New York, California, other places. But,
Man,
yeah.
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
But going back to the topic of moving back to Brooklyn, what was like one of the first things you missed? Was there anything specific? You like miss the vibe? You miss your house? Like what did you miss?
I missed cooking actually.
Oh,
Because that was the other thing is I think when I'm here, because I'm just cooking for myself, it kills time. It fills up time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Whereas when I'm home, my mom's cooking every day for me. So like that period of like from 7 to 9, it's just like there's this added time for me to just like do nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas here, like, oh, like I can think about what to do. I'll go do the grocery shopping, cook. And I actually never cooked before, or no, that's not true. I hated cooking before the quarantine. But quarantine, I started really enjoy cooking and trying different things and whatever.
Does it help that your roommate's also into cooking?
Very much so. My roommate is he graduated from the Culinary Institute. He's not working in the kitchen or in restaurants, but he's very good at cooking. So it's helpful because if I'm trying something, he'll be like, Brian, does this look right? How long does it need to cook? Is this done cooking?
What's your like go-to dish, you think?
My go-to dish,
Or like what
became
is a dish that is like
yeah.
that you're the most proud of?
Oh, that I'm most. Okay, those are two different things. My go-to
answer
is
both of
like
them, man.
Answer both
my
then.
go-to is oyakodon. It's like because it's super easy, super quick, and it tastes good. And I made that a
Fire.
lot.
That's fire, bro.
Thing I was proudest of. I learned that mac and cheese is really hard to make and really
Like legit mac and
legit
cheese, right?
mac and cheese. Yeah, I made mac and cheese and it tasted really good, but I did not know it was going to take that long.
I mean, of course, you take that Kraft, out of the box. That stuff's easy and tastes good. But you make like real, like
yeah,
country
it was
style,
legit. Like
soulful mac and
grating
cheese.
all the cheese and
Wow.
yeah.
I don't know when we'll ever have a repeat guest, but I think the next time if we ever have Jason again, we should do a cooking session.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That sounds fun. I'm down.
Maybe you could bring over some mac and cheese and we'll taste test it. You know what I mean? Oh no, we all make separate mac and cheeses
Oh, okay.
and we taste test for the best mac and cheese. That's not a bad idea.
That sounds fun.
We've been trying to get definitely creative with this podcast.
Yeah.
The other day we were talking about how we should have a podcast episode while I cut hair.
That would be
Because
fun.
I cut Alex's hair the other day.
I like that.
Obviously, it wasn't good because I'm wearing a hat. I'm just kidding. It was really good.
No. It's not. I always say it's the best free haircut you'll ever get in your life. But like, I would never pay money for my own cut.
No, that's legit. You should totally do that.
I don't know. I feel like and that might
Oh, not for every episode, but
A special
just like
episode?
a thing. Yeah.
maybe. I feel like it'd be so funny if we botch it, like, and I just totally mess up his hair.
Right. I
On-
guess
on
it's added
camera.
pressure on you
purpose.
because it's recorded
Oh,
and you gotta.
man.
It's like, on
Get a good
purpose,
cut.
but it's actually fake.
Yeah, I
like, I
barely-
messed up.
Nah, that's what I'm saying, man. I barely know what I'm doing anyway. So, man.
So how's work been for you now that with COVID and everything like that?
Work is good. It definitely we went like there were ups and downs. I work at like a smaller office. We had 17 people, and then in June or July we had to let go of like 5 or 6 people, which is a lot given how the size of our office. And then we lost a couple of big projects in the office and things were really slow. One thing that's super exciting during the quarantine is that we got an opportunity to work with the Jackson Heights community and help restaurants and businesses there with reopening and providing exterior seating for some of the restaurants out there, which is kind of a cool way that we were able to do some work in the middle of the pandemic.
Right. And for our listeners that might not know what you do, actually, I should have
Oh,
mentioned
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I was
part,
about to say the same thing. I was
We
like,
didn't-
do we even
not
mention that?
yeah.
What he does? I mean, we know what you do.
We know what you do.
You guys
but,
know.
Yeah.
You guys
For
know.
listeners.
No, I'm an architect. Yes.
So cool. So, what made you want to get into architecture in general? Is there like anything specific?
Ugh, my story is so lame. I wish I had a cooler answer.
That's what everyone says, but
No, I just loved drawing. I still love drawing. But I wouldn't want to go into fine arts because I don't think I don't see myself as an artist. But I also just loved math.
you're an artist to me, man.
Thank you.
To me, you're an artist. No, I'm kidding.
I feel like there's some artistic.
No, he's super artsy.
Yeah.
He's got the eye for design. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, I just loved drawing and I liked math. So I just put the two together and went into architecture, not knowing anything about architecture. And so the first 2 years of architecture school were really tough, actually, because I realized I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And then third year was when things started to click and I realized that I love it. So I feel super lucky because I feel like it's rare for people nowadays to go into school and major in something and then just fall in love with it and then continue, like to have such a straight career path, I guess.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think the transition from school to your job was pretty seamless? Like, was it pretty different from like learning about architecture from actually doing quote unquote architecture?
Yeah, school and practice are pretty different. The way I talk about architecture school is like learning a new language, so in a way. Like architecture school teaches you how to think about design and to think about architecture, but it's not really focused on the technical aspects that you learn about when you're working in an office. So that's the kind of the difference. When you go into an office setting, it's a lot more of the tedious kind of mundane parts of architecture,
What are like mundane parts of architecture?
like figuring out where the outlets go in the walls.
Or what we were talking about earlier. We talking about finances.
Oh yeah, like invoicing the consultants that you're working with on
Right.
the project, the engineers.
I feel
yeah,
like
all
someone
that.
else
Not
should
sexy
be.
parts.
I feel like someone else should be responsible for
They
that.
should
right?
be.
Yeah.
Not in my office.
We had a whole conversation about that. We had a whole conversation about that.
Smaller offices.
Smaller offices, you have to do a
Yeah.
little bit. You have to
Yeah,
be
you
more.
gotta
Yeah, that
be
makes
more
total
nimble.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that could be good for you, maybe in a longer
For sure.
term
Yeah,
picture, because you have to be fully aware. Like
That's why I
yeah,
like working in small
Yeah.
offices too. I like
wearing different
Yeah,
hats
yeah,
and stuff
for
like
sure.
that. Makes sense. So I know you said you had to like let go a lot of people. Were a lot of them architects or were there?
Oh yeah, our office is all architects.
Okay.
or like everyone except for 2 people were architects.
Right.
But then like, were you guys like working from home?
We are still working from home.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
interesting. Does that affect anything? Just because like
Yeah.
I'm thinking like isn't like most design all about like being together, thinking about design together? Like
For
how do you-
sure. Like
how do you
any
even
of
do
those
that?
sort of meetings, it's a lot harder it's so much faster to just meet around a table and figure things out.
Yeah, because when you're like thinking about design or going over with a coworker, are you looking at physical copies or are you looking at something through a software?
Both.
Both?
Yeah. Usually, if we're meeting in an office, though, I'll print out a bunch of stuff that we're
See.
drawing and look at it together.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like, is it more convenient to print out a bunch of stuff and then
Yeah, for sure.
talk about it versus just sharing it on or hey, come to my screen and
Right.
look at this. So
Both
both
of
you
those
probably
things
need to
happen.
adapt.
Yeah, but then like how do you like accommodate for that now?
Oh, Zoom, like everyone else. I
Really?
guess.
Just
I
like
don't know.
screen
Yeah.
share?
You screen share and then you talk about it. Yeah.
Man, that
So
sounds
everything has to be done through software now.
It's all digital.
man, that sounds so inefficient.
The first, I mean, there are some times where it's more efficient, honestly.
Oh, wow.
Because if you're sitting around a table, you can go off on a lot of tangents.
Right.
And then, so a lot of that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure, there's a lot of times where it's just easier to meet in person.
Interesting. So, when it comes down to architecture, I'm curious, like, what do you think makes a great architect?
That's a good question. I think a good architect,
Is it like design? Is it like engineering and functionality? Like what?
no, I think the first thing that I thought of is like, you have to be a good designer. You need to be creative. Like, a good architect will be a good problem solver. A lot of architecture is like being given a bunch of parameters
Yeah.
and being able to find a creative and innovative solution within those parameters.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So that's why I say sometimes I don't feel that's probably why sometimes people don't see architects as like artists, because we're not necessarily just creating things out of like from our head or
Yeah.
just painting something or creating something just from our own, I don't know, experiences and thoughts.
Yeah.
It's very much rooted and grounded in the parameters we're given: budget, program, site. All of these things inform the creativity.
What about like city regulations? Like I recently saw this
yeah.
video on YouTube. There's a building. I forget where it is. Maybe it's like on like Madison Avenue or something like that. It's a building where its design almost made it like collapse, and they actually have to fix it like overnight, or like they have to basically evacuate everyone. They fix the building, and then they like let people in again. But it was because they have to work around like this church that like you couldn't break down. And so if you look at the building, it's like very like after a certain like point, like after like the 5th floor, it looks totally normal.
Yeah.
But then like everything beneath the 5th floor, it looks like super off. Like there was no reason why anyone needed to make it this way, but it was because of some like city rules, city limitations, and then
Yeah.
like,
So
they were-
that's another added constraint or parameter.
Interesting.
That for sure plays into it.
Interesting.
That you
So-
have to just abide by.
So like, is there a balance between thinking about design and then thinking about like the rules you have to follow?
Balance for sure. I mean, for sure. Like a good architect will have really crazy, interesting ideas that challenge the regulations and rules. But still, at the end of the day, they need to work within those constraints. That's why there's so many bad buildings out there too, because of all the regulations. And I don't know. I mean, that's a oversimplification, but things like that, developers or clients having a say. At the end of the day, it's a service industry. The client has to sign off on what they're getting.
I mean, there's like physical restrictions too, right?
Right,
You just
exactly.
physically can't
Physics,
build
yeah.
like a beautiful building when just surrounded by other structures that are in the way.
Right.
So-
But then I want to kind of touch on what you're talking about in terms of bad buildings. Explain it to me. What is a bad building?
A bad building to me, well, one is just maybe a bit subjective. It's just like ugly. Like there's a lot of buildings that just look ugly.
Oh, word.
You know?
Okay.
A bad building.
Is that like the materials they use, the shape, like?
It's just the aesthetics, the composition. They probably use cheap materials too.
Okay.
Cheap materials in a very standard way,
Okay.
not in an innovative or creative
But
way.
is that can you say that's a bad architect or that's just the bad limitations, right? Maybe the
Yeah, maybe the
architect.
No, I think that's a
Yeah.
bad architect.
You think so?
Yeah.
Because an architect would
A
push
good
back,
architect would be given those constraints and still try to do something that
even
looks
though
nice
maybe
and
they have
creative
like
and-
budget restrictions on physical goods and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, for sure.
Interesting. Oh.
I mean, at the end of the day, if there's so many constraints on a project, there's only so much you can do,
Right,
and so
yeah.
there are a lot of factors. But
Like, make this look into a building.
a good architect probably would avoid a project that looks like it has so many constraints that you can't do any. There's no flexibility or creativity, room for creativity.
So I want to ask a question. I know this is a little bit of a segue, but you ever watched that show Extraordinary Houses?
I love that show.
like
on Netflix.
one.
I love that show.
I watched one episode.
Did you want to watch more episodes, or were you just like after
No.
one episode? That's what I was gonna ask. As an architect, for us normal people, we're like, oh
Wait,
my gosh,
I'm actually
this is
curious what you
amazing.
guys, how you guys liked it, because something that I care about, or something I think about a lot, is that architecture is very inaccessible for people who are not architects.
Of course.
I think it's
Yeah.
just like, if you're not in the world of architecture, you don't know how to look at a building. You don't know how. It's just very like foreign.
Yeah.
And so something that I wish it wasn't so inaccessible. I wish there was a way to make it more accessible.
So are you saying if it was more accessible, we would watch something like that, and you would like what was
No,
your
so I
reasoning?
appreciate
Yeah.
stuff like that
Okay.
because I think it starts to make buildings and architecture more accessible for people. Like it gives you a way to think about, like look at
Right.
it and
I
understand.
mean, and
it.
that's the major appeal for us,
Right,
where
right.
we know nothing about architecture, but the two people that are there, they explain the reasoning why
right,
they use a certain
exactly.
material.
So I appreciated it
Yeah.
for that regard, but it felt a little like HGTV.
Of
a
course,
little-
of course.
Yeah,
It's
it
gotta
has
be that
to be,
way.
right?
It's got to be that way.
Yeah.
For me, what I do love about that show, though, is that I think it actually is very similar to what you're talking about in terms of problem solving. I like the homes the most, where they had some sort of problem based on the location. 'Cause
Right.
It's always like
Yeah.
on the side of a mountain in the middle of the
Right.
woods.
You know that one that's in the Alps, like that
You got it.
Hobbit hole looking one.
Oh yeah.
That was the one episode I saw
Oh, okay.
because I like that house.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like the physical restrictions, or even just being able to move like products from one to the other.
There's
They
that
had to
episode
take
where,
a helicopter and then they carry
Right.
it over.
Yeah, the episode where they made the house with a plane.
Oh, I don't know.
There's an
yeah,
episode
okay,
where
so
like
that-
the whole exterior, like the upper roof
Looks like a plane.
No, it's made out of like the wing of like a
okay.
a Boeing whatever plane, like a huge
Oh, I
like
see, I
commercial
see.
plane. Yeah. So, but I don't know, that's so interesting to me because for me, I'm someone who I really like having what I call like 5-second or like 5-minute conversation like intellect. So it's like I'm not like really knowledgeable about like anything, but I can really talk as if I know about like something for
Yeah,
at least
yeah.
like 5 minutes. So
That's what it does, right?
That's what a lot of architects. That's what a lot of architects are.
wow,
I like
that's huge. Okay.
Architects aren't, because there's so much that goes into a building. You know, the electrical, the plumbing, mechanical, structure,
Yeah.
like all of these things.
Sure.
We like to think we know a lot about all of these things,
Yeah.
but we don't. We only really know a little bit about enough about everything to make the building.
Yeah.
Okay, then for people like us, then, what's something that we can say or like talk about or know to make it as if we do know a lot more than it seems? Like I look at a building and I say like some sentence, and you're like, oh wow, like do you know architecture? Like
This building is pretty.
like what's a way you can formulate a sentence about like a building so that it seems
Well,
as if you really know?
One thing, not even just to like fake it, but it just out of your own curiosity, like knowing if you're looking at a good piece of architecture. This is only like if you're looking at like something that is good. But like knowing the materials it's made out of is something that a lot of architects would care about.
Like what materials are there? Like steel?
The stone, the
Concrete?
type of stone that they selected, the type of wood, whether it's like a like, you know,
Oh, it's like an Okinawa like pine. You know what I mean?
yeah, or just like, Even different types of metal, steel, the way it's treated.
Yeah, even if you watch that the Netflix show, they talk about like the material. To your point about the using the recycled or material to preserve something. I'm just making stuff up at this point, but you know what I mean.
That sounded like you knew what you were talking
Dude,
about.
I believed you for a second, man. I was like, oh shoot.
Hey, take
We got
some
two
notes right here.
architects
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so materials is probably key. Like, is that what you'd probably talk about if you, let's say you like, you know, I was also an architect. You're obviously an architect. We're out in the streets of New York, and we see like run across this new building, and we're talking about it. Is that like the first thing we're talking about? Like, oh, like look at this. Like,
No, the first thing we talk about is probably like
shape.
the form, the composition,
Interesting.
stuff like that.
and
Does
then
it just look nice?
and then materials.
Materials. I mean, excuse me. It depends. Like, a good building might just be good because it used really good materials in a good way. Maybe a building is good because the form and the shape and the spaces and the proportions and all of those things are done really well, but the materials are just, whatever. So
Interesting.
it depends on kind of what makes the building good.
When you compare good architecture, how often do you compare the outside of a building versus the inside of a building? Like, do you think of it as a totalitarian like building, or is there something like saying like, oh, this has good architecture on the outside, but the inside kind of looks like garbage?
Both.
Both?
Yeah. I would say generally the larger scale of the building, the more easily it'll be to split the exterior and the interior. Like
What does that-
skyscrapers.
What does that mean, like splitting?
Right? Like if you look at a skyscraper, you can look at the skyscraper and be like, wow, that's just a really beautiful building. But the interior might just be whatever because the floor plans are all similar. And there's nothing interesting about the interior, but the shape of the building itself is really interesting.
Do
If you're
you-
talking, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, keep going. Yeah.
Whereas if you're talking about a house, the interior and the exterior are a lot more closely tied, right?
Yeah.
So the scale of it will affect how I.
Would you have like two different architects working on the outside versus the inside kind of thing, or how does that
Sometimes
work?
people do that. Yeah, for sure.
And then
Where do interior designers come
yeah,
into
that's what I was
play?
gonna ask after that.
It's kind of like a spectrum. I see it interior. It's not like there's an architect and an interior designer. Sometimes architects will also spec the furniture that goes in the project. Interior designer might sometimes just be limited to that, decorating the place. So picking out rugs, furniture, lights, fixtures, that kind of stuff. Sometimes the interior designer might be a lot more involved with the actual planning of the space, like where walls go and what goes on the walls.
Yeah, one of our friends worked at a WeWork as an interior designer, and she had to come up with what kind of paintings or wall art you want to use, what kind of like lights to your point, everything like couches.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I always thought that like, I don't know. I always thought that what you're talking about as an architect was done more so by interior designers, but it's interesting to know that the two are pretty different. It's much more like it seems as if architects are more like the production kind of like we're seeing like what the whole feel and vibe is. No. What the whole look should be, but then interior designers figure out what like the use and the
No, I wouldn't say
vibe.
that.
Is it the other
I
way
would
around?
say it can be like that. That's why I'm saying it's a spectrum. It depends. Like sometimes architects will do everything that you just talked about,
Yeah.
which is what I prefer doing. I like doing that.
Okay.
So yes, architects definitely do the big picture. What's the vibe? What's going on? But a lot of I think what I find exciting about architecture is all of the details as well.
Interesting.
But in a bigger building like Empire State Building, whatever, like one of those big buildings versus like a house, maybe when you're doing a larger building, you can't think about those inner
For
details,
sure. That's
but-
why if you're doing a large scale building like that, you have to split up the work.
Right. But when you're doing something like a house, you have the
Right.
ability to think about
For
those
sure.
inner
Interesting.
details. Yeah.
Interesting. Is there any like architecture style that you hate? You're just like, oh, that's like like Art Deco or like whatever. Like it's like, oh, it's so cheesy, so gaudy.
Not in particular. I wouldn't say I have anything.
You feel like all types of architecture has like a place and
There's probably
history?
things I prefer more than others, but I don't know.
Hate
I
is a
wouldn't.
pretty strong word,
Yeah, I wouldn't
yeah.
ever be like I hate this architect's work or.
Well,
hate
like I
this
think about
style.
like clothing. Clothing is design. Like I really don't like that whole like '90s skater grunge look. You know, like even to this day, like I don't like that look.
Yeah.
That's why I'm
Right,
saying I'm
right,
curious. Like, you know, I feel like design is very polarizing. It's very subjective. So, you know,
Maybe it's more about a preference, right? Like you were saying.
Yeah, that's just my personal. I don't have strong opinions about disliking things.
Okay.
I guess.
except unless it's like really just
Yeah, if it's
absolutely
just
ugly.
really bad.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Poor material. That's Jason's number one priority.
That's the key. Then I guess like if you were to design your own home,
Yeah.
let's say it's like a single family home,
Yep.
how would you do it? What would you want?
So the answer is probably disappointing because, like I was saying before, it's so dependent on, for me, especially a house, is so dependent on the site, on the location.
Okay, then let's pick it out.
Oh, I want to give
Are you-
one
yeah.
on a slanted hill, like
Ooh.
like kind of like this.
You got to think about the
You know what I'm
angles.
talking
though.
about?
What's
You gotta
that-
think about angles,
What's,
yeah.
what's that hill
Yeah.
angle like? It's like mad
I don't know,
steep?
but it's so hard because like, so like
front
you
of a
could take it.
beach.
My next question would be like, what direction is the slope? Is it facing north? Is it facing southeast, west? Because that will affect how I place the building. What are the views? What am I looking at? Do I want to look at certain views that are better than other views?
Yeah. So on
Like
a
all of
slope,
these types of things.
looking at a beach view. And what else did you need?
I guess the slope would face towards what's sunset? Sun rises in the east, sets in the west, so on the west side. It's like
don't
a
know.
slope to the beach on the west side.
I don't know. It's so hard to just throw something out there.
Okay. What about like style, just like general style? You know, like I'm super into like the Japanese style. You know how like the
Yes, I
Japanese
do
style,
like that. I
floors,
think about
walls,
this a
ceilings,
lot.
all wood?
I'm curious because if I were to start my own practice, I wouldn't want my work to be recognized in a certain style. I
You
would
don't
want
wanna get boxed in.
I would want each building to look so different.
Mm-hmm.
But in my mind, I think like that. I wonder if I were to do my own office, I'll naturally just gravitate towards things that have a style. I think that's probably what will happen more.
Do you find
But-
that more people, like, or I guess more well-renowned architects do have a specific style, or
Oh,
is
for
it-
sure.
Okay.
They definitely have things that they gravitate towards and things that they just like.
Yeah, but are there other architects that are just known to just be so sporadic that one building could be like this and then another building could be like
There
completely
are architects who definitely have more variety in their work than others.
What would you
but-
say your preference is then? Is it the Japanese style that Harrison
My
was mentioning?
preference.
modern. I
Modern.
feel like everyone loves that.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that whole thing people like nowadays? Modern farmhouse. How do you feel about modern farmhouse?
Some people even like
It's
the
trending.
whole like the whole gray concrete look thing.
Oh, that-
Yeah, concrete is. I love concrete.
It's a little cold. You know what I mean? It's a little like.
Yeah, it is cold.
I'm like I'm in a
It's
prison.
intentionally cold. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's meant to be like that.
I do like the Japanese, like where the,
I will say like some of the architects I really like Tadao Ando is a Japanese architect who does a lot of concrete buildings.
Oh, wow.
And they're very beautiful.
What do you think about like wooden?
What is beautiful? Yeah.
I always, especially in those extraordinary houses, the ones that are like you could see that it's all wood.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like it's gonna
how-
catch on fire. You know what I mean? Like yeah.
yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's basically
like
just
a wooden
it's a
table with a
campfire
wooden wall.
waiting to happen,
yeah. Yeah.
It's just really beautiful. I don't know. It's like, I guess to your point, there's just so many different ways
There's
to
a
build
lot,
a house.
yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up our time here, man, we want to always end off our podcast with a very special segment.
Okay.
And feel free to answer this as freely as you want. It's pretty open ended. So I'm always curious. This year is a very specific year. This year has been a very particular year in terms of all the different things that went on. For you personally, though, what was probably the hardest thing about this year?
Honestly, the hardest thing for me this year, just to be very personal, was just that my aunt passed away
Oh wow.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
at the very end of July. And she's like the only family that I really have from in the States. Everyone else is in Korea. So, and thankfully I haven't really been that close to death, or I haven't had people who are close to me die. So she's like the first person who I'm very close with who has passed.
Wow.
So that was the toughest. That's probably the toughest thing that happened this year.
Yeah. So I mean, that sounds like it was prime time COVID too. So like,
Yeah,
how did you operate around that?
I mean, thankfully in July, COVID had subsided enough where we can do like a limited number of people, do a viewing with like a limited number of people and do an outdoor memorial service. So I was thankful for that. But we drove down to Philly and did all of that and spent time with family. And my cousins are still there and they have kids. And so we saw a lot of family there.
Yeah, I mean, that's still a blessing to have everyone there
for
and just
sure.
be close together. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you really close with your aunt?
I would say she's the closest of everyone in my extended family.
Okay.
She's also an amazing artist, and she's like one of the few people in my family who always encouraged me to do art and encouraged my artwork. So like even before she passed, she told me, she's like, she had this huge studio with a ton of supplies. She was like, take whatever you want.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's crazy.
She thought you were an artist before you even think you're an artist.
Yeah.
And that's crazy because
Yeah.
especially like, you know, us growing up, you know, in a Korean household, like most Korean parents like wouldn't want to necessarily push their child
Right.
into art, but the fact that you know your aunt was obviously an artist, but then because of that, you know, she still saw the potential in you, and really pushed you in that way. Man, that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
That's super amazing.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you could find some inspiration in her work for your work. So
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, I feel like that's definitely must be a huge motivation for you in the future, like, you know, as you build your career. Man, well, thank you so much for sharing that, man. It must, you know, it's tough news, but
Yeah.
it's real life. So, you know, I
Yeah.
definitely appreciate it, man.
For
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, awesome. You know, well, on this note,
On that note,
On that note,
we're wrapping this episode up. Yeah.
Cheers to
Hey,
that.
your-
Yeah, cheers.
Yeah. To your aunt, to your family, man. Well, you know, we want to thank you so much for coming all the way out here, man. You know, we had dinner together. We were drinking together. It's always great to have you. Always great to talk to you. And just thank you so much for your time, man.
Yeah, can't wait to see more episodes.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap up, man, you guys already know what the deal is. You guys got to go follow us on Instagram. That's Did You Eat Yet Podcast. You got to go to our YouTube channel to watch this, obviously. So go smash that subscribe button. Go smash that like button. And I'm getting better at talking about this every single time. At the first time I did this, it was rough, but now
always awkward.
I know now.
Yeah.
you got to bust out all the handles right
Yeah.
now.
Absolutely. Go share this with your friends. You know, if you got friends who are future architects, make sure you hit up our boy Jason right here.
Yeah, I would love talking about people who are interested in architecture.
And we'll throw out some handles, you know, in the description box below, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever Jason's comfortable sharing with. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll definitely add those in.
And for everyone watching, we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for watching, guys.
See you a lot, you guys.
Bye-bye.